Good Monday morning, OJA. Welcome to this episode of Positively Hopeful Podcast. I am Dottie.
And I'm Allison. Today we are going to be joined by a host of people to talk to us about our new Whitetail Level E substance abuse program. We're going to go over the program itself and the therapy that our young men get while they're there. And then we are going to have Lynn Morris on with us to talk about data and the importance of keeping our JOLTS updated so that he can collect good data and how we as an agency use that data. But first, I want to kind of put Dottie on the spot and talk to her a little bit about last week and how New Worker Academy went. Last time we were on, we talked about New Worker coming up. And so, Dot, tell us a little bit about how New Worker went.
The feedback we've gotten from the very first week of us kind of taking charge of this academy has been very positive. We've got wonderful reports back from all the attendees. We have 13 new workers attending this session. We may have a few the last week of the month attending just the YLSI portion that may not have that training yet. They came on, they just kind of missed that gap.
Right.
But it overall was awesome. The first 3 days, we really covered the curriculum and all the JSU information we wanted to get out there. So from day 1, 2, and 3, we covered from intake and detention all the way through custody.
Okay.
Thursday, we had Laura come in and talk to us about courtroom testimony.
And this is Laura T.
Yes.
Okay.
Laura, she came in and, she knocked it out of the park. I know she was, she's only been with us a very short time, but she did very well. All the attendees really, really enjoyed her aspect of it. She was very straight to the point. It was great to hear, this is courtroom testimony. This is, what we got going with YO, expungement. Jamie Sherman came in and did a few JOLTS things with us that we hadn't already covered. Because our goal this year was we worked through JOLTS on cases so we could show them the steps.
Oh, that's good.
Through JOLTS. And it was great. I think they really got a lot out of it. We were able to improvise and show them things they wanted to see that they weren't quite sure on.
Good.
We had a couple workers who really wanted to know some CMS type of stuff. So we were able to kind of hit on that a little bit the last day and really go in and show what they've been asking for, with also the knowledge that the last week of the month we'll have Jennifer Creasy in. And she's always amazing. She always can just really put all that in perspective and really give good ideas on how to do those treatment plans. And then Friday, we kind of ended up switching up our agenda a little bit, and we had Terry Smith come in, and he spoke with them about the history of OJA. He had a couple great slideshow presentations and really kind of brought us from where we started, when we were still part of DHS, and how bad things were back there. You kind of forget about it as we've gone. I've been here almost 18. I think you've been here almost 23.
Yeah.
So we kind of forget how bad it was.
But way before us.
Yes.
Yeah.
What created OJA, how bad it got for us to become our own entity. And how amazing the resources and programs we have now have really changed things for our kids and our families.
And how we never want to forget that history so that it doesn't repeat itself.
Yeah, and it was hard to watch. And Terry even told him that, this is hard to see, when you're talking about the Indian schools and how bad those were, and even at Raider, and how bad that was. And it's oh my goodness. To seeing why we have policies and procedures and statute that indicates why we do what we do. It was good, I think, for them to hear that portion of it.
Right.
So then we got great feedback. They loved it.
Oh, I bet they did.
Yeah.
I bet they did.
And that would just kind of happen because Terry had popped in earlier in the week, and and Jenny was like, "Hey, do you want to come back? Talk to us about this." He was like, "Yeah, I would love to." So we'd initially planned Friday for Jamie, and then she had something else come up that she needed to attend. So she came in.
So it just worked out.
And it was perfect. So
those are the best whenever it works out that way. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that, because I know, you all taking new worker on was a huge thing, and you wanted it to be done really well.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to hear that you had some really good feedback.
Yeah, we really wanted to give it a throwback.
Yeah.
To where some of us did New Worker years ago.
Right.
And Terry even told everybody, hey, I created New Worker. So, it was like, wow, I forgot about that. But it was cool.
That's great. That's great to hear. All right. So stay with us, and we are going to start with Brittany and Shell and Jeremy Evans. They're going to join us at the table to talk about whitetail. Back. We are joined now by Shell Millington, our Director of Behavioral Health, and Brittany with Whitetail. She is the Director of the facility there. And Jeremy, our Assistant Director of JSU. So welcome. Thank you for joining us. And welcome to the table. So we want to talk a little bit about the new Level E facility that we have, Whitetail. It is our substance abuse facility, and just really how that facility became a facility for us, and what makes that facility different for our young people as opposed to just our regular Level E facilities. So I'm going to kick it to you, Jeremy, first.
Well, I can just talk about how youth they make their way toward to get into whitetail. First of all, they got to be in OJ custody, and from there they send the worksheet to the placement unit. And at that time, we make a determination by what's in the worksheet, the information, what kind of substance abuse that they've been abusing, such as fentanyl, marijuana, alcohol, those types of substances. And at that point, if the placement unit makes a determination that they meet the criteria to go there, then we send that the assessment over to Brenda, and she does an assessment evaluation. And if they meet her guidelines of it, then they will go to whitetail.
Okay, and we're going to bring Brenda on in a little bit and visit more with her on what those assessments look like.
Right.
So, and then they go on the waiting list, obviously, just like any regular one of our youths.
Right.
And they work their way through. And then whenever they get into the facility, Brittany, whenever they come to you all, then tell us what daily life looks like in the facility.
So daily life is they'll come to us, and we kind of give them 3 days to kind of get acclimated with the program, learn our expectations, the rules, things like that, because we have a lot of rules to provide some structure and stability for the youth. So it may be more than what they're used to,
Right.
probably. So we give them 3 days, and we just kind of work with them in a group setting to be able to utilize coping skills, not be very agitated with having so many people along with them. We teach them daily skills. We monitor them on, little things, hygiene, cleanliness, chores.
And what about education? Do they go to school on
Yes.
campus, or do they go to school in a regular school setting?
So they do go to school on campus. Our school is through Norman Public Schools, so
Okay.
they have an actual teacher. It's kind of like the Dimensions program. However, everything is on campus, so they come to the facility and provide them with education or testing and things like that.
And what about summertime now? Do you still go through the Norman Public School, or is it kind of like a summer school? They do work, but it's not through Norman School.
So in the summer they do work, and it's not through Norman Public School. We have been looking to hire a actual summer school teacher. Hadn't had any luck yet, but they do study hour. We call
Okay.
it study hour. So
Okay.
they do whatever it is that they were working on. We still have that type of work for them at that level. So they still will do work from 8 a.m. until 12 p.m. So it's kind of like summer school.
Okay. And then we're going to bring Wesley on here in a little bit also to talk about the difference in the therapy that they get as opposed to our regular level E's.
Right.
But talk a little bit about the phase system that you have and that they work through to be able to level up in the program to be able to get passes and what that looks like.
Right. So, like I said, when they first get there, they are on novice, which is the first kind of safety phase. We're getting to know them, they're getting to know us. And then once their 72 hours is up on novice, and then they will do a level test to phase to trainee, and which is our base level. Trainee, everybody's on trainee. You know, you're still working on things that you need to continue to work on. We don't have much expectation out of them on trainee because, again, you know, that's the base level.
Right.
So they are on trainee for about 3 weeks. And then each time they are ready, or they feel that they are ready to level up, then they will ask for a level advance request. So it's kind of like a maybe an application, you know. So we're trying to continue to teach teach life skills. So they put in a level advance request, and then they'll tell us why they feel like they should move to the next level. What have they done well? What do they still need to work on? And things like that. And how would they feel moving to the next level would benefit them. So then we bring the level advance request to treatment team, which we have those on a weekly basis every Monday. And we talk about the client, you know, how they did, how their progress was that week, and, you know, things that they need to work on, troubles they had, things like that. And then we review their level advance request. Then if we all agree, they move up. If we don't agree and we feel like, you know, they should still work at that same level on some of the things that really matters on the next level that we would really look into, then, you know, we give them our feedback of, you know, no, you didn't get your level today. However, you know, these are things that we feel like you need to work on, and let's revisit this. Now they can apply every week after they are eligible to level up.
Gotcha. So there's no time limit that they have to wait after that. Every week they're eligible moving forward. That's great. Yeah.
So then, say they move up from trainee, then we have apprentice.
Okay.
Our apprentice is our first level up, and they are granted more privileges, more phone time, more options. They can choose, you know, what chore they would like to do. They can go on outings and get into the community, you know, because we want to provide them, we want to introduce them back into the community as well. Right. I mean, as smoothly as we could.
Right.
So then they get to go on the outings, and we try to do an outing once a week, you know, and it could be something simple, a nature walk, the park, the movie theaters, the zoo, things like that. Right. And, you know, and we want them to be able to maintain their behaviors, the appropriate behaviors on the outings as they would do inside the facility. Then if they succeed, they have to be on apprentice for about 4 weeks. After 4 weeks, they can request a level advance request, put it in again, same process as they move up to the level. Then we have journeymen. On journeymen, they are, again, allowed more privileges, more weekly allowance, longer telephone times, staff passes. We have a mentor program inside our facility. So we, on a monthly basis, we pair each staff with a different youth just so that they can build rapport, get to know things. I feel that each staff may have something to offer the youth.
Right. So it's not the same staff member with the same youth the whole time they're there. You rotate that around. Right. That's great.
Sometimes if a youth struggle with a staff, I kind of pair them, have them spend more time together just to kind of have some kind of understanding of, hey, you know, well, you know, what's going on here, you know.
Well, and they may have different backgrounds, or they may have, you know, different ideas of way things that should be. But if they get to know each other on a more personal level, they may be able to understand each other a little better.
Yes, and I feel that it has had a lot of success. You know, we've had youth who just really couldn't mesh with a certain staff. And you know, now they're like, hey, can I go on a staff pass with such and such? You know, I really want to go to the gym or hang out with them. So it's been a good thing.
Good.
You know, so they go on journeyman, and, you know, then they're allowed a 6-hour pass inside the community. with Guardian or something like that. And then they'll stay on that level for about 5 weeks. So each level, a week is added for them to maintain all the appropriate behaviors for them to, have cleanliness, do their chores, communicate positively, not engage in negative behavior, not be on refocus, which is our consequence system,
Right.
and things like that. And then they just kind of hold themselves accountable, still talk about what they've done well, what they still need to work on, things like that. After Journeyman, we have Craftsman. And then Craftsman, they're eligible for a 24-hour pass by the time that they should meet Craftsman. And then they, again, have more dollars for their allowance, more phone time, longer showers. They just, each level gives them more incentives to maintain and do what they're supposed to do. By the time they get to Craftsman, they have like a movie night for some of the higher levels. We give level lunches, so on a weekly basis they come together.
Because food's a big deal for them.
Food's a big deal.
we hear about food all the time, right, Jeremy?
If you want to motivate some young boys, some young men,
give them food.
Yes. So then they're eligible for their level lunch. So they get together and really talk about, hey, what do y'all want to have today? Again, so it's not just what I want. It's, hey, we're a group. What do we want?
Right.
And, so on a weekly basis, we order them food out, or sometimes we plan, hey, the outing this week we'll go to Chili's, because again, we want them to still maintain appropriate behaviors while they're in the community.
Right.
Go somewhere and sit down, have a nice meal, have some good manners, things like that. So they've been to Chili's and things like that. And after Craftsman, it's Master Craftsman. So then they'll be on Master Craftsman for about 8 weeks, roughly. By this time, majority of their time has already passed, and they're coming up to either their 5-month mark or they're preparing to discharge if, they're really excelling. And that's excelling in programmatics, that's excelling in, on the therapeutic behalf of the program. And then in the community, you're going on outings, you're going on passes, and you're coming back, and you're still excelling. You're still doing what you're supposed to do.
Right. So you talked about the time of 7 or 5 months, and we've always typically heard the 7 months is about as long as a kid stays in our lovely group homes. And Shell, we know that as an agency, we have learned more is not always better. But I know some of our courts don't always agree with us on that. Talk a little bit about why our agency is leaning more towards that and how we've learned that.
I think the biggest probably dose of feedback we got was several years ago going through a Georgetown length of stay academy and looking at outcomes related to out-of-home placement. When you have the 5 to 7 month spot, you can really capitalize on progression. When you keep extending it, young people have the ability to begin regressing. As Brittany's talking about, a lot of the things they're working towards and maintaining. You don't want to plateau and then have them wait too long. That can build frustration and then worse outcomes. You also see in literature, the more you have people out of their homes, the less you're developing in just a standard development way. So your emotional and your behavioral development is really impacted in a congregate care setting. So truly outcomes can become worse the more time that we're putting young people in artificial environments.
Yeah, and that's definitely not what we are looking for with our kids. And I know there's that myth out there, that, especially with our substance use kids, that they need long-term care to be able to be successful in re-entering the community and staying clean. But that is definitely a myth.
Yeah, when you look at, and I don't want to take Leslie's or Prinda's place in this conversation, you want to be able to maintain a good chunk of sobriety. And so that's something that Whitetail is able to offer. The crux of substance use treatment is when you're back in the communities, back in your environment where you have the temptations, where you have the situations where your coping skills used to be to use. And so I've heard in some discussions with Brittany and some of her colleagues, connecting young people at Whitetail to NA meetings and the exposure to what it needs to look like when they go back in their communities. But the good amount of time and the good treatment they're getting at Whitetail is a huge step up to be able to maintain when they go back into their community.
Remind me whenever we have Wesley or Brenda at the table, we want to continue that part of the conversation. But Brittany, is there anything else about your facility that you want us as JSU to know before we turn this over and start talking more therapeutic?
No, we just, again, we really try to have the youth involved in their treatment. We really try to have, them have a say-so in what's going on. We ask them to advocate for themselves. We ask them to hold themselves accountable, things like that, just so that they feel, we're not judging their faith, or we're not trying to plan their future for them, because a lot of youth that we have been on their own per se, or, they feel like they're an adult already because of their background or whatever that may be. So, we just try to make sure that they're heard.
Right. Yeah. Which is huge for our kids, because for a long part of their life, they have felt like adults have made the decisions for them.
Right.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and coming to speak to us about your program.
No problem.
I appreciate hearing about Whitetail, and this is definitely a program that our kids have needed to be able to go to.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Next, we're going to bring Wesley to the table and talk about the type of treatment and therapy that the young men go through while they're at Whitetail. Welcome back. We are now joined by Wesley, the therapist, LPC candidate from Whitetail, and Dottie, ADS in Garvin, Murray, and 57,000 other
Just Pontotoc.
Pontotoc.
Yeah, Garvin, Murray, Pontotoc.
Pontotoc County. So we are joined by them at the table. And so welcome, Wesley. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
And Shell has hung around. So Shell, thanks.
Yeah.
Being awful quiet over there today. So we had a great conversation with Brittany about Whitetail and the program just in general. And she kind of talked to us a little bit about, Jeremy kind of talked to us a little bit about the steps of placement and how a kid is referred to the program. And then Brittany explained really the program, the programmatic side of it, and the levels and daily living of the program. But we really like to talk to you, Wesley, about the difference in the therapy that the young men get there at Whitetail, really compared to our other levelees, because this is labeled as our substance abuse treatment center for our young men. And what does that look like? Because to be honest, we've had other programs that we as JSU workers have been told was our substance abuse treatment centers. And so we would like to know.
Okay. Yeah. So, brand new program, right? And it is tagged the Substance Abuse Treatment Center, right? And the therapy is basically all the services that they receive there is substance abuse related. The only thing that really isn't for sure that is individual therapy, which can deal with any issues that they might be dealing with.
Right, because we know our young men aren't just dealing with substance use, right?
Right. And a lot of them don't even think they have a substance abuse problem, right?
Right. Because why is it a problem?
Right.
Yeah.
And so like group therapy, we're using the Matrix model, which is like a booklet that I have that goes over group therapy, family therapy, and individual therapy. And there's different sessions. And so basically just started kind of at the beginning and do one per session. And
So this matrix, he looked at you. So I'm going to assume this is something that you all agreed on or you found or.
So when we were having discussions about standing up a substance use specific group home, we had some good conversations with DMH. And we wanted to think about what's going to be the best curriculum to then equip Whitetail to be able to use. And Matrix is a model that's specific to the population we're trying to target. So we were able to purchase that curriculum and give it to Whitetail so that they have no issues with the resources related to the target of the focus of this program. DMH is also going to be offering training in that model. And I think in the coming months, I keep bothering them. But it's exciting to be able to have something that you're not just kind of thinking this is really good. Like you have some guidance on this is truly a treatment targeted for these young people. We also have been able to give some of the resources to Kojak as well. But the focus has been to make sure that Whitetail has what they need for substance use treatment.
That's great. That's really good stuff.
So each session is basically spelled out. Like this takes this long as part of the session. This takes this long. Discussion takes 40 minutes, and it's really hard to get the guys to stick to a script like that. Right? It's not going to work.
Right.
So what I usually do is I get some other resources that are related to the subject or the topic for that session. Right? So that I'm able to continue on, as opposed to just like, okay, let's talk, you know? So I want to keep them busy and engaged and, for discussion purposes.
And is that done in a group setting? I'm going to assume is what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And so whenever a new youth comes in, do they have to wait until that group is finished, or can they fit in that group setting at any time?
Basically, you can come in and start at any point.
That's great.
Right.
Yeah.
Basically, like at the beginning of each group, have the guys introduce themselves, talk about like what led them to getting placed at Whitetail, what their drug of choice was, just to kind of get the guys familiar with each other, right? And to be, relatable to one another, right? So you can really start anywhere.
And then is Whitetail also like doing the 1 hour session to 2 hours of groups or whatever? I mean, are they still held to that same standard as our regular group homes?
Yeah, correct. 2 hours of group a week, and then one individual session, and then one family therapy session, a minimum a month. Right.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you're familiar. So again, I'm going to plug the hub. Which is shameless of me, but I'm going to do it anyway. So OJA has the hub, and it is Clay Cody should be in your facility, and Clay is a workforce development specialist that works with me. And so if you have family that is struggling to be able to get to your facility to be able to do family therapy, we can assist that family member in getting there, like with a gas card or other resources to be able to help them. So if you are having struggles with family, we would love to be able to assist with that.
Oh, that would be awesome.
So Clay Cody is your man to be able to reach out to be able to help with that.
I was actually explaining the hub a little bit to him.
Oh, good.
We were waiting
Good.
for our turn, talking about some of the great new things that OJ has going between it and
Yeah. So shamelessly plug that. But we just don't want our families to miss out because we know that that's a huge part of reentry.
Oh, for sure.
And so we want to be able to help families because that's been a huge barrier for them.
Yeah. I mean, we're able to do it virtually,
But virtual
it doesn't
is not
work.
the same.
It doesn't work quite as well.
Or except, whenever a kid earns a pass, but then they can't go on a pass because their family can't afford to get there. So, yeah.
Awesome.
So is this Matrix model a new model or is it new to OJA, our group homes model? How long has it been around?
I would have to, it's a good question. I'd have to look to see when it was published. It's new to OJA. It's something that DMH introduced us to. And so we've been using different curriculums beforehand. And as Allison mentioned earlier, in some of the more original substance use programs that were level E based, it was not a model that was used. So it's new to us and new to Whitetail.
So earlier we were talking about the length of stay and, we have traditionally been told that our youth with substance use needed to stay long term in placement to be able to be successful in reentering back into the community and staying sober. And that is a myth. And we talked about our length of stays and OJA's philosophy on that being sometimes longer can do more damage than a shorter amount of time. And so we would like to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, I can see how that could be a impact negatively, right? Because they're out of the environment so long.
Yes.
That they come back in, and then there's a lot of fear probably getting back into the community or back into the environment they came from. The important thing, I believe, is getting the guys to believe that they're capable of something different and getting them to believe in themselves, right? And that's one of my major focuses, is to just get them to buy into, like, hey, the way I was doing it before wasn't working. Look where it got me. Maybe I need to just give it a shot, and that's where I start. It's a little nugget, and I can build from that.
And then whenever they are getting ready to re-enter back into the community, what are some of the things that you and that youth work on to get them prepared, and what are they setting up back in the community?
Well, like learning healthy coping skills is one of the biggest things, and that's like really driven home, from the beginning to when they leave, right? So like I've contacted some Alcoholics Anonymous group, right? And they come in weekly. And so I provide them with that because it's really important to develop a new social group, right? Because part of it is changing your people, places, and things. And I really drive that home. And, OJA, I was told, really kind of wants it to be associated in a roundabout way, like with the 12-step programs, right? Because they work. So I really want them to get introduced to that and buying into changing the people, places, and things. So when they're going back into the community, what we're doing is recommending like continuing individual therapy, whether that be FFT, hopefully, and then getting involved in maybe continued outpatient substance abuse programs, right? Because just something to continue it, right? To have that transition from being in placement to being back in the home environment, right? And I think addressing the family dynamic is a really important part of that, right?
Right. Yeah.
So,
is there anything else that you feel like we as JSU workers, because this is kind of my follow-up question, I'm an old school JSU worker, I was in the field for a long time. Is there anything that you feel like we coming into your facility with our kids need to know about, or that you want us to know before we get there?
So I think the biggest difference between this program and other programs is we want them to have a little bit more freedom, right? Like we want them to be able to go out into the community with outings and then passes and be able to make the right choice. I think that's the biggest thing, because anybody can stay sober locked up.
Right.
Right. We want them to want to be sober and make that choice.
That's great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah. My pleasure.
So we are going to come back and have Brenda from Kojak join us, and she's going to tell us how the assessments that she does on our youth that are referred through a placement worksheet, how she does those assessments and what she's looking for to see if the youth is a good candidate for this program. So we'll be back. Welcome back. We are now joined with Brenda, the drug and alcohol coordinator at Kojak, and Shell and Dottie. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the technical process on how our young men, and we probably should start with Whitetail is for boys. I don't think that we did talk about that. Shell, how many beds are there?
16.
So 16 beds for boys, and it is in Norman. So, but let's talk a little bit more on the technical process and how we came up and decided on that process. So Jeremy had spoke about JSU workers put in a placement worksheet as normal, and they can make the recommendation of whitetail on that placement worksheet. But you all, or the placement unit, is going to look at that placement worksheet as a whole. And you guys made the decision that there was going to need to be some added assessments done before it was just determined that a youth qualified for whitetail. Talk, Shell, a little bit about why that decision was made.
Yeah, so when we thought about the need for a substance use specific group home, we wanted to be intentional about who was getting those beds. So it could be that way more than 16 young people are referred to whitetail. We've got a lot of young people in Oklahoma. We have a lot of substance use, and so we wanted to be very thoughtful about what the criteria would be for a young person to be admitted to whitetail. So thinking about the experts within OJA, we thought immediately of Brenda. So we have a lot of knowledge in Brenda in terms of what she has been doing and has the ability to do in terms of identifying a true need for substance use specific treatment. So we thought through what would the assessment process look like and different criteria in conjunction with Brenda. So we have something documented to show why someone meets criteria for whitetail. Brenda can talk much more eloquently about this than I, but she can also recommend whether outpatient substance use treatment is what she would recommend, whether a standard level E is what she would recommend versus whitetail, or even some thoughts she might have about substance use at Kojak.
Okay. So, Brenda.
Yes.
So, talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about the assessments that have been decided that you will give to them then, and how that looks. Do you go to them? Are they brought to you? How is that scheduled?
In the beginning, I went to them a couple of times and then figured out that's a lot of travel. That takes up a lot of time.
Right.
So then
Because you do have a job at
Yes.
Kojak, right?
I do have other things, many other things that I have to do at Kojak. So we set up the Teams meeting, and we got the SASE online, which is a lifesaver because the SASE took a lot of time doing the paper forms and grading it. So the SASE online has been essential in getting this done a lot quicker, to get instant results. So I get the referrals from Rex or Jeremy, well, usually Jeremy or Shell.
Okay.
And then I contact the worker, who then contacts the facility that the child is in. And then we set up a Teams meeting. I email the SASE to be completed during the Teams meeting so I can help with questions.
Okay.
And then once I get all the results, and then I have a questionnaire that I developed that asks like substance abuse history. I do a background check on the family, see if there's any criminal adjudications or felony convictions or misdemeanor convictions for substance use issues.
Okay. And you get all of that information, the questionnaire, you get that from the youth directly, and then you run the background check on the parent.
Mhm.
Okay. And then you take that information and with the SASE
Mhm.
and
The interview.
and the interview. And then you make your determination whether it's community treatment or regular level E or whitetail or Kojak.
Yeah, we have a check sheet for, I think it's 10 criteria. So I hopefully they meet at least half, if not more, of those criteria, the admission criteria.
And then you send that back to Jeremy and Shell
And Rex.
and Rex. Okay. And then how many do you think of these assessments you're doing a month?
I average 1 to 2 a week.
Okay.
Sometimes I can go a week without doing any, but then I can do 2.
Right.
So I average about 2 a week.
About 2 a week. Okay.
And that information that Brenda collects is then given to Whitetail. So we heard from Wesley. Wesley's able to see that, so he has a warm start to beginning to services for that young person.
And if it's not, whitetail is not recommended and it's recommended that the youth go into the community, let's say FFT. Is that information then available to FFT for them to be able to see it?
Yes.
Great.
So that any information Brenda is able to collect, she gives to those people she listed. If the decision is something whitetail or not, of course, placement then lets the worker know. If the recommendation would be to go to a standard level E or home-based substance use treatment of some capacity, we can give all that information.
Now, while doing those assessments, do you ever also meet with the worker that may have had this kid for several years and knows some of the history?
Well, that's usually included in the referral that they send. Okay. But if I need more information, I can always reach out and email the worker or call them.
I think that's why it's so important for our JSU workers to get detailed on the placement worksheet, to get that information on that placement worksheet, because we have to remember that other people are seeing that placement worksheet and need that information. And at the more detailed, especially if we're asking for a specific facility. I mean, detail is great all around, but if you're wanting whitetail, that this is going to need to be as detailed as information, because Brenda's not going to know. And it sounds like she doesn't have the time to get on Jolts and dig through and find out all of that information.
I try to find time.
Yeah, but if that could be on that placement worksheet, that would be amazing to be able to have that information. And we're going to have Lynn on next to talk to us about data and how important that stuff is. And this is just another example of the more detail we could have for her readily accessible, the better it would be.
Yeah, she'll include a lot of really good information, a lot of good questions on there.
On that questionnaire.
Is there ever a possibility we might have a similar program for our girls?
Yeah, so when we launched the RFP, we really wanted both males and females to have this type of an opportunity. What we got in responses was specific to a male-based program. What Kevin's been really helpful in thinking through is some of Brenda's team has the ability to provide substance use services to females if they're at point, Mustang, or landing. So it's something that the worker can request, is that there's a need for substance use specific treatment. And we can coordinate with Brenda's team to see about availability for someone, or Brenda herself, giving that support to the females. But that's been the goal. That will be the goal. As we all know that our female numbers are lower. And so being able to start with a 16-bed male facility really served a huge gap. But the ability to coordinate with Brenda and the experts that she has is something we can supplement to the young females in the programs.
That would be fantastic. I know I'm starting to see a rise with some of our young ladies that just have pretty serious substance abuse issues, and it's hard to find treatment
Very much.
in the field or in communities. So it's definitely a big need.
Agreed.
So that's something that they could ask for on that placement worksheet, is additional.
Yeah, you can note it, and then Brenda, her team does other things as well. And so just trying to think through capacities and being able to do that supplemental. But certainly is worth adding in that there's a request for this young lady to have substance use specific services is worthwhile.
That's good to know. Brenda, is there anything specific you feel like our JSU staff that are watching today need to know that they can help assist you in this process?
The more information, the better. Sometimes I get like maybe a sentence or two in some of the questions, but the more background I can get from the family, that really helps. Saves me a lot of time and trouble searching things.
Agreed.
Is one of those questions, since I've never seen the assessment, does it indicate like what they may have tried in the past? Like we've already tried FFT, they've already been to CRC, they've tried other programs in the community. Is that listed on there?
I think that's in one of the questions.
Mm-hmm. We try to target what has been efforts that have been used before. That's something that Brenda can weigh in different domains to see about criteria. But that's been a question for us is, in order to advocate for this program and continued funding for the program, how there are not a lot of open doors in the community when it comes to substance use treatment, especially residential. That's why OJA has pushed for the need for this specific program.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today and just giving us some insight on whitetail and what it takes to get a young man to be able to be referred there, and just whitetail in general and that program. So we are going to close with our whitetail discussion, and we will be joined next by Lynn Morris to talk to us more about data and the importance of keeping our JOLTS updated. So stay tuned. Welcome back. We are here with Lynn Morris, as promised, to talk about data. Welcome, Lynn.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us. So we previously were talking about the importance of JSU workers and having the information on the placement worksheet to kind of trigger for their kids to get on the radar to be able to be looked at for the whitetail program. But we really want to dig deeper in that conversation and how important it is for data in general. And when we talk about data for OJA, that really is JOLTS.
JOLTS and CMS, and we have another system called IRS that's used at Kojak.
At Kojak. Okay. So when we talk about JOLTS and CMS and IRS for Kojak staff, that data is entered by our staff, our frontline workers.
Correct.
And we talk about it all the time, and we're collecting data, and we're collecting data, and we're collecting data, and collecting data. But why? That's what we want to know. Why?
So in this day and age, as you know, everything is about, we've got to have data to justify what we're doing. For statistics, for programs, evidence-based programs to show that they're successful, you've got to have the data to be able to prove that. And so one of the things that we've been working on the last several years with OJA is trying to start understanding all the data we have. There's a lot of data out there that we've collected for, I'm going to say, decades.
Right.
That we've never really analyzed.
Right.
You know, as a JSU worker, they go in, they do an intake workflow, they enter contact notes, they enter adjudications, they enter all that. And only at the last, I'm going to say 2 or 3 years have we really looked at that, not only from a state level, but drilling down to each district, each county, each supervisor, and each worker.
Right.
And so one of the things that we're trying to do is you've seen, and I'm sure a lot of the managers and supervisors have seen, is all the new online reports and dashboards that we have. Those tell a story. One of the things that I think we need to improve on is a lot of those frontline workers don't ever see that. They don't understand why, we do it because that's what we've been told to do.
Right.
But helping them understand, because you enter all this data, the deputy directors, the finance people, the director are able to see all this information at a global level. And so it's just important. And as we start looking at AI, being able to have AI analyze that data a lot faster, a lot quicker, a lot more efficiently.
Right.
So it's just, and we've got a lot of data out there that we don't even know about. That we've got workers filling out pieces of paper today that they've done it because they've done it for 20 years, and it goes into a file.
That's right.
So that's another thing.
They send it somewhere, and then it's never even looked at
Right.
again. Somebody somewhere goes, oh, I'm just going to stick that on my computer because I don't know what to do with it,
Right.
because they've just sent it in on their monthly reports forever.
Exactly.
Yeah. So my thing is, like, the director can't know every kid that we touch within our system, but he can go out and tell our story.
Correct. Yes.
And that's what I feel like the director's wanting to do. I
Yes.
mean, because he's asking. I mean, whenever I see him, he's asking all the time.
Right.
And he's wanting to be able to tell the story of OJA, all of OJA.
Correct.
And so he does that by looking at our data.
Absolutely.
And so he's wanting to be able to define the data and look at it. He's asking those questions. What does this data mean? What does this mean? And so sometimes we're put on the spot. I mean, because we're like, I don't know, where'd you get this data? Right?
Absolutely. I've been there many, many times. Yes.
So that's why this conversation is important, because we want the field to know what they're doing and the stuff we don't want them to do those junk reports.
Correct.
We want them to do what's important, and that they are making a difference in the work that they're doing, and that we want to be able to take what they're doing and the work that they're doing and that it be meaningful, and that we take it and the director can look at it, then he can go out and he can tell people outside of our agency the story of what's going on in Pittsburgh County, or he could, in Beaver County,
right,
or whatever. And would he love to be able to go there and sit down and get to know every kid in that county? Absolutely.
Right.
Is that feasible? Probably not. But he can look at the data and get that information.
Correct. Yes.
So how do we do better?
I think that's going to be an agency-wide thing. We need to better understand what's being collected out there today that is not being used. We've got, like I said, workers who are collecting information that maybe we don't need anymore. Understanding and having them stop doing that. I think we have to look at the way things are being done today. While we may not know it at the state office, it may be happening at the local office. And I don't know that it's happening the same way in each office. And that's another thing we've got to look at. We've got to be standardized across the agency. We can't have McAllister doing this, Clinton doing that.
Right.
And so I know we're working at that, and we have improved 1,000-fold in the last couple of years. We've just got to keep moving forward. I know that the director wants to tell those stories, but when he does, he's got to have the data to back it up, because someone's immediately going to go, really? Are you sure about that? Right. So he can go, here's the data.
Right.
And we have processes in place to say, we know that data is valid, and we know that data is good.
Accurate. Yeah. Because, the one thing that we've learned through this is you can't argue with data. If it's good, solid, accurate data, you can't argue with it.
Correct.
And that is the quickest way to get people to change.
Yes.
Is whenever they're looking at the data and it is accurate, and because it's easy for people to sit back and say, well, that's not us, that's somebody else. Right.
Right.
But whenever you bring the data to them about them, their area, and then they're like, oh, okay, now it's time for us to do some changing. So whenever we are entering stuff on JOLTS, and as JSU workers, and we start at intake and we go through, how important is it for us to enter information into every space? How important is it for us to enter that contact note on every contact? How important is it for us to, where do we draw the line? You know what I'm saying? Like, you know us, we want to know. What data is being pulled?
I'm going to tell you probably 90% of the information in JOLTS is being pulled today.
And that's shown on the dashboards. And
yes.
I know, and that's, JSU workers don't get to see those dashboards.
Right.
And
that's where I was saying
yeah.
that we have to educate them better and show them, here's the fruits of your labor, not just with dealing with your kids, but being able to deal with telling the story.
Right. Because it's there, and that information is being used. And I wish JSU workers could see it. And the reason that they're not able to see those dashboards at this time is because you're still working on them, right? You're still trying to get them where everybody wants them.
Some of them we are. A lot of them, they're pretty set. I think one of the problems or one of the areas we need to address is that we've never made this data readily available agency-wide.
Mm-hmm.
When you do that, you risk that data leaving the agency. That is our data. That should never leave the agency. So you may have a GSU worker sitting out there and the DA goes, oh, by the way, do you know this? Well, the worker could pull it up and without thinking, just send it to them when they really should have gone through some channels
Gotcha.
to release data.
Gotcha.
So that's one of the things that we need to do better on, especially with policy. And I think we have policy in place that mentions some of that about if you get asked questions about data, run through the communications department and things like that.
Mm.
But when you open that door up, that data is going to leave the agency no matter what. And as long as we educate our workers going, hey, it's here for you. But if someone outside the agency, ask about it, check with your supervisor, call,
Yeah, especially when we're proud of it,
Exactly.
because it's like, look at this. I mean, this is great information that we look at how good we
Right.
are doing, or that stuff. It is tempting to, when people want to know it, to give it.
It is.
Yeah.
And another thing, when you said that just then, was making sure when that data is released that you document what it really means.
Right.
While a lot of us and the people we work with understand juvenile justice,
And we understand our language.
or we understand our language,
Yes.
when it gets outside the door, that becomes subjective to the person reading it, and they may not truly understand what they're seeing. They may be thinking it more in an adult correctional facility
That makes
or
sense.
for adult data.
That does.
So that's one of the things we want. We've had this happen. We've had our data get out and people totally use it in the wrong context, not necessarily maliciously, but just because of lack of understanding. So that's a piece that we need to improve better on so that we can release those.
Well, I think that's a great part of what you were talking about, of the education piece.
Right.
It's not that we're trying to be super secret.
Right.
We just want to be educated, and kind of like with AI and what we had talked about on here previously with that, we just don't want our workers to do things that they may not have understood could
Right.
cause damage when they didn't know that it wasn't malicious. They just
Right.
may not have known.
Exactly.
So
Education.
education.
Training.
Yes, training and education.
Yeah.
Training and education. But those dashboards have been very helpful. I now have a dashboard for the hub, which I'm super thankful for because I was hand counting all my data. But we use the data to be able to apply for grants. We use data on when we get grants. There is a process, like for me, recording that information, and then I have to report that information to the grantor every quarter. So I have to be able to gather that information and report and show what we are doing with that money every quarter.
Right.
So that data is there. What are some of the other things that data is used for within our agency?
Well, I mean, you mentioned grants for budget,
Yes.
legislative. Though we always get questions from the legislature.
Yes.
Our service providers, they're always asking questions. So it's a wide range of questions that we get. And what you mentioned about the hub was a perfect example of using data to stop manual processes. You enter the data one time, it may be used 30 other places
Yes.
that you don't even know about.
Yes.
But because you've entered it that one time, we can use it in so many areas.
That's right.
So that's another thing on making sure we're capturing all the data that we need to.
Yes. Right. Because whenever I was doing it manually, if anybody needed that, they had to call me, and then I had to go find it, and then I had to get it out there, where now it's there.
Right.
So they don't have to call me anymore. Time saver. And then also, I had a thought too on it, where it's, when you talked about providers, like with FFT, collecting that data, we're able to see on that how many cases they don't finish. I mean, there's a lot of things that we can monitor on outside providers as well, which is great information for us to have. So, I mean, we're able to help monitor the type of services that our kids are getting when we're making referrals too. So data is can be an amazing thing if we are collecting it correctly.
If we're collecting it, and then also making sure we now go to the truth or the source of the data. So, for instance, education. We now get data from the Department of Education. We now get data from the Employment Security Commission. So
Yes.
we're going out. We now get data from DHS. So we're now trying to, instead of our workers having to enter all this, we go to the truth or the source of the data and get it for us, so we know it's timely, it's accurate, and it meets their standard definitions. So we're not saying, well, the worker typed it in wrong. No, we got it directly from the source.
Which, like for us with the hub, that on the employment is amazing because we don't have to rely on the family to tell us, yes, they're working or whatever. We can get it from
Exactly.
employment, which is a valid source. Not to say our families aren't, but we don't have to. It's a credible source,
Right.
and which makes what we're doing even more credible because it's showing that we're helping families get employed. So,
Exactly.
which hopefully then we can build our program to be even more evidence based.
Right.
So,
Yep.
yeah. Well, anything, Lynn, that you feel like before we wrap up that is like this one specific thing we see this consistently that is not being met to a standard that we would like for JSU workers to focus on?
So one of the things we're currently working on that I've mentioned is called geolocation coding or mapping. And so, and that's taking an address that is entered in JOLTS and getting the geolocation code so we can map that data. And so look at it from a mapping perspective of all the things going on within our system. We have a tendency for workers not to enter addresses where they're not mandatory, especially like a referral. While a lot of them do, they may not have the information, but following up with where the referral actually happened, making sure our residential addresses are current and complete. Because if they're not complete, then sometimes when we match them, we can't get a proper. So, addresses is going to be a big one moving forward because we are going to really invest a lot of time in mapping moving forward.
So when you say like the referral, you're talking about like on the police report.
Yes.
So
Yeah, where the offense happened.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, y'all heard it, folks. Addresses. That's where we can improve on as JSU workers. Thank you, Lynn, so
Thank
much
you. I
for
appreciate
joining.
it.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you all for joining us for this episode.
We'd love to thank Constancia for being behind the camera and doing our edits for this episode.
We will see you all next week.